We're broadcasting live in English from a secure, undisclosed location deep in the heart of Mexico. This is Mahayogi, and we're doing our Gita talk. We're going to try to discuss the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But first, let's invoke Guru. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtabitam Jena Bhutale Shayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Sha Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kansa Radha Kantanamostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarvapanishado Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopalanandana Parto Vatsa Shudhir Bhokta Dogdam Gitam Ritam Mahat Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gita Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantras Tasya Namami Jani Karman Yekam Tasya Devasya Seva. So we're in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And last week we were looking at these verses where Krishna declares his opulence, and at the same time it gives us an avenue towards a very personal realization of God, because sometimes what we hear and think about when we discuss the Gita up until the 7th chapter is of a very philosophical nature. So the first 6 chapters especially describe the Atma and the Paramatma. But here in the 7th chapter, Krishna is coming out and saying, I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. And we described, what does that mean? Bhagavan, according to Parashara Muni, he says, one who is full in opulences, all 6 opulences being knowledge, fame, beauty, renunciation, like that. I can't remember all 6 off the top of my head. Knowledge, fame. God is all-knowing. Everybody know, and also he's all famous. Everyone has heard of God. Saint Anselm gives the ontological argument, saying that God must exist because you can conceive of an all-powerful being. So all power, all glory, all knowledge, all beauty, all renunciation, and one other. The 6 opulences of Bhagavan. So Bhagavan means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's different concepts of God. Brahmeti, Parameti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdyate. The different concepts of God take into consideration the idea that God is everywhere and all pervading, or he's within the heart. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead means that Lord Govinda is Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karna Karna. He's the cause of all causes. And here in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's coming out and saying, well, I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And before this, he's describing different yoga techniques and practices, how you can become self-realized. But later, he tells Arjuna that I'm the cause of all causes. There's no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung upon a thread. And then he says, I'm the taste in water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I'm the sound in ether and ability in man. I'm the original fragrance of the earth and the heat and fire. I'm the life of all that lives and the penances of all ascetics. So he's telling you that if you can't see God in a yogic way, try to see God through his miracles. And this world in and of itself is a miracle. The taste of water is a kind of miracle that we have tasted all. The heat and fire is miraculous. He says, I'm the original seed of all existence, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the prowess of all powerful men. So whenever you see anything, a manifestation in this material world of power, strength, beauty, then know that is originally coming from Krishna. I am the strength of the strong. All states of being, goodness, passion, or ignorance are manifested by my energy. But I'm independent. So this is kind of interesting. We say the Supreme Personality of Godhead because we understand, according to the Vedas and the Brahma Samhita and Chaitanya Charitamrita, that God has the power to divide himself and yet remain infinite. The infinite divided by the infinite is still infinite. Om Purnamada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. Although the infinite divides himself or expands in different avatars and manifestations, he's still supreme. He's not diminished in any sense. So we know that according to the Vedas, Krishna manifests himself as his brother Balaram, who is in charge of all the necessities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantashesh, the couch upon which Mahavishnu lies. And then there's different Vishnus in charge of maintaining the universes and manifesting the universes. And this particular material world is a consequence of the supreme divinity casting his glance in the general direction of Maya, or the Maya Shakti, or the illusory energy. And that glance is sometimes qualified, for example, in the Brahma Samhita, as Shambhu or Shiva. In other words, the sum total or conglomerate of the undifferentiated spiritual energy. And metaphorically, that penetrates the matrix of this material universe, or the womb of the material universe. So that's symbolized by the linga and the yoni, the spiritual energy of infinite living beings, penetrating the material matrix and creating a sort of mix. And this mix involves consciousness and what we call space-time. And in that mix, this material universe that we know, the living beings are covered by ego. And ego becomes divided in terms of the sense, the mind, and the intelligence. And here we are. We're sort of ensconced in this matrix, if you like. And it's kind of interesting if you think about physics. Physics is the study of material objects and their movements. If we peer into infinitesimal particles, we discover that the basic unit of matter are the atoms. And within the atoms, we'll find things, particles like protons and electrons. But in the 20th century, there were a lot of breakthroughs in terms of discovering what's inside the protons, what's inside the electrons. These are called subatomic particles. But these particles are so tiny that you can't really see them with the eye. They're so tiny that even the light that is used to discover them will disturb their constitutional nature. So it's very difficult for scientists and physicists to understand what the underlying aspect of material nature is, especially at the subatomic level. And one of the problems they have is trying to understand an important force in the universe. It's called gravity. We know a lot about electromagnetic waves. We know a lot about the spin of particles. But when we try to understand how does gravity fit into this, it defies the best explanations of the scientists. Einstein tried to incorporate gravity as part of space-time. And he said that, well, gravity has the power to bend space-time. But particle physicists want to discover what kind of a force gravity is. Is it electromagnetic? Is it a light force? How does it work? So just as it's possible to reduce light itself into particles and waves, they're looking for some way to understand gravity better. And what they came up with is something called string theory. And I mention this because in our next verse, it says here, Tribhir Gunamayir Bhavayar, Epi Sarvamidam Jagat, Mohitam Nabijanati, Mamebhya Paramavyaya. Prabhupada translates this, deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. He says the whole world is enchanted by the three modes of material nature. So this expression, modes, comes from the word guna in Sanskrit. And the word guna really means string or a cord or like a rope that ties things together. So now the scientists, when they're exploring the inner workings of subatomic particles, they like the idea that if you trace the motion of a particle, it forms a line. And so these very tiny lines, they look like strings. In other words, what's holding the whole universe together are tiny strings of energy. And so it's interesting to me that 5,000 years ago, Krishna is describing the inner workings of subatomic particles when he says, Tribhir Gunamayir Bhavair, Abhi Sarvamiram Jagat. The whole Jagat is tied, the whole universe is tied together by these strings, these gunas. Now, of course, that's not the only way to look at the gunas or the modes of material nature. You can think of these sort of strings as lines of energy or vibrations. The scientists will explain that just as a violin string vibrates, these tiny subatomic strings of energy vibrate and throw off different particles. So you can think of the warp and woof of the universe as being formed by infinitesimally tiny strings of energy whose vibrations have an influence. Or you can think of this in terms of wavelengths of influence. In any case, however you conceive of the modes of material nature, guna also means quality. For example, when Krishna talks about varnashram dharma, he says guna karma vibhagasha. It's not janma karma that separates people into different social classes, but their quality, guna karma. So the word guna is interesting because it means quality, thread, influence, vibration, wavelength. And in the next verse, Krishna explains to us, Daiva hiesha gunamai mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. He says, these threads of energy that hold us in place are a kind of illusion. They set up a sort of a matrix. And because we're covered by ego and mind, senses, we fall for it. We're seduced by these three influences. And the trigunya, or the three influences, are called sattva, raja, and tama, which means they're sattva refers to, so it's usually translated as goodness, passion, and ignorance, but tama also means darkness. And raja means something like creativity also. The rajas, the kings. We often hear the word Maharaj. So a king, what does he need to rule? He needs a certain creative energy, the power to conquer. It's very different from Brahminical energy. Sattva guna is more about being in touch with spiritual reality. So another way to look at the gunas, you can see them as different sorts of colors. In Abrahamic religion, for example, things are seen more in terms of black and white, good and bad, sin and piety. And you're either good or bad. So there's hell or heaven. But the Hindu, if you like, description of the universe, or the description of the universe found in the Vedas, including our participation in the universe, has more of this sense of three different colors. If you're looking at your computer screen, everything you see on the screen is made up of red, green, or blue, or red, yellow, and blue, three colors. So you can think of the modes or the gunas in terms of three different colors, and these colors color everything. And there's a higher concentration of the sattva gun in Brahminical activity. In other words, the closer you come to God, the more light there is. the farther away you go from God, the more darkness there is. So there are dark forms of life, like snakes and scorpions and subterranean lizards, subaquatic, benthic animals that move in the darkness where there's no sunshine, bacteria. These are all tamasic forms of life. There's tamasic eating, tamasic discussions, tamasic charity. This is all described later in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna gives a deeper background on how the three modes of material nature work. But it's interesting to me to conceive of this in terms of color. Even those who are in sattva gun, however, are not free from karma. Even if you live a completely sattvic life as a vegan, vegetarian yogi, it doesn't mean that you're free from Maya, because you're still involved in the egoic problem of how to exploit this material world. So therefore, Krishna says, Daiva hiesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. This Maya of mine, this illusion that I've created for you, that you have embraced and that you are seduced by, is very difficult to free yourself. As I said before, it's like a spider web. We're entangled in all these different material influences, vibrations, wavelengths. And keep in mind, it's not so much that Maya is controlling you, but that you have sort of bought into this illusion and you like it, you want to stay there. Something like the film, The Matrix, where people submit to a certain kind of brainwashing because they find it pleasant. So in a sense, we're brainwashed by our own tendency towards exploitation. And Krishna's telling us it's very difficult to overcome this. So at the beginning of the chapter, he's explaining, I'm going to tell you about general knowledge and then realized knowledge. And in terms of general knowledge, you should know, philosophically, God exists. Ontologically speaking, you're a soul. There's a supreme soul. You should submit. But if you can't really grasp that sort of theoretical knowledge, think of God in a practical way. Look around. Look at the miracles in your ordinary life, and you can see God is real. As Srila Prabhupada, Srila Sri Maharaj used to say, Om, a big yes. What you're looking for, it's there, it's real, it does exist. And then he comes to this point in his discourse where he says, on the other hand, not everybody gets that. It's not an easy thing to understand. Even if you think maybe God is real, maybe what's being said here is important, maybe surrender is useful. Even then, it's so difficult to apply oneself to a life of contemplation, to a life of dedication. And so he comes with this verse. He says, this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me, can easily cross beyond it. Mam eva ye prapadyante, mayam etam taranti te. Taranti means to conquer, to overcome. He's talking to a warrior who understands things in fighting terms. So he's saying, you can conquer this enemy, Arjuna. How? By surrender. Surrender to me. Now, most people don't understand that. But here it is. This is the key verse in the 7th chapter. Prabhupada really liked that verse. And so what is surrender? Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam rakshasyatiti vishrasya gokrite baranam tata atma nikshepa karpanye shadvida sharanagati. Rupa Goswami describes surrender in terms of 6 aspects: accepting those things that are favorable to devotional service, rejecting unfavorable things. Also, having the conviction that Krishna will protect you, accepting the Lord as one's guardian or master, and finally, full surrender and humility. In a sense, these are all one thing, but Rupa Goswami gives a nice breakdown here, and you can find more on this in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Prapana Jivanamrita. So, Ramanujacharya comments that he says, this Maya of mine consists of the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, because it's created by me, the divine, for purpose of sport. It is divine in its power and therefore difficult to overcome. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj always used to say, if you're going up against someone who has divine backing, then you should also have divine backing. So Maya has divine backing. It's not an easy nut to crack. It's created a bit indirectly, but it's created by Krishna himself. Ramanujacharya continues by saying the word Maya is used for the effects of the 3 gunas. And I like to use the word gunas because all these different meanings can be unpacked from the word guna: energy, vibration, wavelength, influence, the web of material existence, the matrix. He says the word Maya is used for the effects of the 3 gunas because it has the power of generating wonderful effects. In the case of the magic of asuras and rakshasas. So we see the magic of asuras and rakshasas in modern science. Mayadanava was a brilliant scientist and architect, and he created the palace of Yudhishthira at Indraprastha with strange reflecting pools that looked like marble and strange marble floors that looked like reflecting pools, so much so that when Duryodhana passed through there, he stepped on a marble floor and fell in because he couldn't see the magic of Mayadanava. So we can see a little bit of the illusory energy even in modern technology. Here I am speaking to you from Mexico, and you're seeing my image in Ukraine, Israel, the United States, Odessa, all around the world. So the word Maya doesn't exactly mean false. It's real, but it's not this. It's a kind of illusion. So Krishna's teaching that if you want to become free from this kind of illusion, you have to surrender. And that's kind of the purport of that verse. Daivahyesha gunamai mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. So continuing on, as he's telling you, well, you might ask, if everybody can see the miracle of God, it's self-evident, then why wouldn't you surrender? Why wouldn't you just, I used to think this when I was a new devotee, and I was astonished by the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and his books, and I found shelter in the Hare Krishna mantra, and I felt that it completely changed my life. I thought, well, why wouldn't everybody want this? Ramanujacharya, when he went to his guru, Jamunacharya, his guru told him, take this mantra. And Ramanuja asked him, well, what is the power of the mantra? And his Guru Dev told him, well, first of all, this is a very confidential mantra. Don't tell it to anybody. But this mantra has the power to liberate you from this material world. And then he told him the mantra, which I believe was Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So Ramanujacharya immediately went out into the street and began telling everyone. He got on top of a roof and he shouted to the people below, this mantra will save your life. This mantra will liberate you from the material world. Just by chanting this mantra, you can focus on divinity, the absolute God, and it will free your soul. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And so the disciples of Jamunacharya immediately came and arrested him and took him before Gurudev. And Gurudev said, you have defied my order. I told you this mantra was confidential. How dare you defy the instructions of your guru? And Ramanujacharya turned to his guru and he said, well, because I believe in you so much, and you told me that this guru can, this mantra can deliver the entire universe, how could I not give this out to the people? Obviously, that's your real desire. I know you told me, don't tell anyone. I understand that's your external meaning because you want to maintain order in the ashram and you want people to follow the rules and get initiated. But I feel that if it's true that this mantra can deliver everyone, we have to give it to the entire universe. And Srila Sri Ramakrishna liked that. He told me that story. Story of Ramanuj. So my point is, when I heard this Hare Krishna mantra, and I feel a real connection with God by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Strange as it seems, but having read the Bhagavad Gita and now being given access to this mantra, I feel that this can deliver everyone. Everyone must know about this. But here Krishna in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he's saying, well, my divine energy is not so easy to overcome. You may understand intellectually. You may get a feeling that, okay, I understand the soul. I know about yoga. I know something about God, but I just don't want to surrender to that. I just can't do it. How is that possible? Well, Krishna says, the divine energy is very difficult to overcome. And as he moves on through his argument, he starts talking about, well, how is it possible that people don't surrender? He says, Namam duskritino mudha prapadyante naradama maya parita jnana asuram bhavam ashrita. There are people who cannot surrender. He says those miscreants, duskrita. Duskrita means duskritino. It's someone who dedicates himself to doing bad. Dush means bad, and krita means deeds. So evildoers, mudha, it means, Prabhupada translates that as foolish, but it really means an ass, a burro, as we say in Mexico, or a donkey. And the donkey's an interesting animal. He's very virtuous. He's very strong and powerful, but you try to move him when he doesn't want to go somewhere, and he's immovable. You can't do it. It's very much like a man who is pretending to be asleep. You can't wake him up. If someone is sleeping and you try to wake him up, then he'll move. But if he's sleeping only in name, he's pretending to be asleep. Doesn't matter what you do, he'll continue to pretend. So this is the characteristic of the mudha. So Prabhupada translates, those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, Narayana, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So Krishna's answering Arjuna's question before he asks it. If it's true that you see miracles everywhere in your daily life, well, then why don't people surrender? They don't surrender because they're pretending to be asleep. They're enchanted by the illusion. They're seduced by their dream of exploiting the world. And when I say they, I include myself. Prabhupada comments, it's said that simply by surrendering, one can surmount the laws of material nature. At this point, a question arises. How is it that educated philosophers, scientists, businessmen, and all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna, who gives liberation? And the Gita answers this question frankly. Learned leaders of society like Brahma, Shiva, Kapila, the Kumaras, Manu, Vyas, Deva, Asita, Janaka, Prahlad, Bali, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Sri Rama, learned persons like that surrendered to the lotus feet of the Supreme Person. But those who are not, they have some plan for exploitation. And for this reason, they're avoiding surrender. So sometimes we wonder, well, why can't I make progress in Krishna consciousness? And the reason is we're avoiding surrender. We don't want to do what is favorable for devotional service. We don't want to reject what's unfavorable. And we don't really want to depend on Krishna. We prefer to depend on our own materialistic powers to get us through. It's very difficult to depend on Krishna. Well, then the question comes, if those are the people who reject surrender and Krishna consciousness, what kind of people come to Krishna consciousness? And so in the 16th verse, Krishna says, Chatur vidabhajante mam jana sukritino Arjuna. Arto jigasur artarti gyani cha bharatarshava. He says, well, there's four kinds of sukritinos, pious people who begin to offer devotional service. And these are the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and one who is searching for knowledge. So, what kind of jana? He says, artaha, the distressed. And I found this practically in the Los Angeles temple in Los Angeles in 1976. Among the people who came to our movement and joined were distressed people, hippies, homeless people. They had nowhere to go. They had no shelter. And they saw, well, these Vaishnavas here, they're happy. They know something about the meaning of life. Let me join together with them. And so sometimes people have hit bottom. They've looked into the abyss, and the abyss looked back at them, and then they fell into the darkest, deepest hole in the material universe that they could possibly find, and they want to get out. They come to Krishna consciousness. Then there's also jigyasur, the curious. People are curious. They think, well, what is this? I don't know who these people are, but they're fun. They're having a good time. They're beating on drums and they're singing and dancing, and they have lovely food, and they're not angry people. Let me inquire into this and find out who they are. So the distressed and the inquisitives. Then there's also those who are looking to profit. They think, well, something's going on here. Maybe I can get together with them and I'll get something out of it. There's no risk, no gain. I need to risk something, perhaps I'll gain something. Like, for example, in the early days of the Krishna consciousness movement in Eastern Europe, in perhaps Israel and Russia, other parts of the world, devotees like Goswami Maharaj would go there and preach, and they didn't speak Russian, so they would need an interpreter. And sometimes they even had to pay money to the interpreter who could translate into another language. And the translator thought, well, this is good money. I'm making more money translating Bhagavad Gita into Russian than I might make teaching English classes. So there's profit to be made here. So some people traffic with the devotees like that. Later on, those interpreters became devotees themselves because they started out trying to make money, but later on, they found that the greatest profit is in the treasure of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes in Jagannath Puri, for example, when I was there were tour guides who were working as tour guides because that's where they could make their money. And they found, well, the devotees, they want to know where is the Siddhabokul tree of Haridas Thakur, where he chanted, I don't know, 100,000 names of Krishna daily, or 64 rounds daily. Where is that tree? Where are the different holy places where Sanatana Goswami would walk? And so these tour guides became expert in that. And anytime they saw American devotees dressed in saffron walking the streets, they would come up, make friends, and give them a tour. Many of those people later, they became devotees. So they began with a plan to try to make some money off the Krishna consciousness movement. We see that. But later on, they become devotees themselves. And then Krishna also mentions the Gyanis, or the wise men. And so also there may be a combination of these. Perhaps a wise man who's distressed and inquisitive comes to the temple and thinks, I want to find out more about Bhagavad Gita, about Srimad Bhagavatam, about this ancient knowledge of the Absolute. Prabhupada comments that of these four, those who are distressed and those who desire wealth are called sakama devotees, devotees with material desires, whereas the other two, the inquisitive and searcher for wisdom, are mokshakama devotees, searchers of liberation, because they all worship Krishna. They're considered to be very fortunate. So in due course of time, their material desires will gradually dissolve. And they might begin as Kanishta Adhikaris, but by the association of pure devotees, they become a pure devotee themselves. This is described by Narada Muni in the Bhagavatam when Vyas asked him, well, how did you become Narada Muni? How did you attain this high stage? And Narada explains, Sat Sangang Mukta Dushango Hatum Not Sahate Buddha Kirtyamanam Yasho Yasya Sakrid Akaranya Rochanam. He says a person who is actually intelligent is able by the association of pure devotees to hear descriptions of Krishna and his activities. And these activities are so attractive that one who hears of them does not wish to give up such association with the Lord. So then who are those who surrendered to Krishna? They're of this type. Baladev Vidyabhushan comments that some are afflicted by disaster. For example, Gajendra, the elephant who was being attacked by a crocodile in the Srimad Bhagavatam, prays to Vishnu for deliverance. Others want to know more about the nature of the Atma as being distinct from the body, Jigyasu, and Shaunaka Muni is an example of this. And others want wealth, such as a kingdom, and Dhruva Maharaj is an example of this. The Jnani already knows his self, and he understands the Paramatma. And the Jnani who wants to advance in devotional service, in a sense, is one of the best beginning bhaktas. And Shukadev Goswami has given us an example of this. So, Krishna continues, he says, Tesham Jnani Nitya Yukta. The Jnani who becomes a devotee will be a very powerful devotee because he can preach. Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate Priyo Hi Jnanino Tyartam Aham Sa Chama Aham Sa Cha Mama Priya. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best, for I'm very dear to him and he is dear to me. So Krishna here, he says the Jnani who becomes a bhakta is especially powerful as a devotee because he can explain devotional service to others. He becomes a preacher. Udara sarva evaite jnani tvatmaiva me matam ashtita sahiyuktatma mam evanu tamam gatim. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like me, my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sah mahatma sudurlabhaha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. So here we find the definition of a Mahatma. Gandhi was often called a Mahatma, but he did not correspond to this level of being a great soul, where one knows Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the prime entity in everything. And so then Krishna's going back and forth. He's helping Arjuna focus his mind on what's the nature of those who surrender and what's the nature of those who don't. He says, on the other hand, kamais tais jair hrita jnana prapadyante nyadevata. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto the demigods and follow the particular rules. Tam tam niyamam ashtaya prakritya niyata svaya. The rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So Prabhupada comments, less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of the demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires. So generally speaking, people have a superficial understanding of divinity. And they think that if there's a higher power, I should pray to that higher power for a good harvest, for sufficient rice crops, for money, for a good marriage for my daughter, and all these sort of external ideas. Prabhupada comments, the worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal. Prabhupada gave the example once. He told this story of a man who's pulling a barge down the Ganges River. He's walking on the banks of the Ganges, pulling a rope. And at the end of the rope is a barge. And he's praying to Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma appears and says, what would you like? I see you're working so hard. You're pulling that barge. Your body is in a terrible condition. You're exposed to the heat and the elements and the rain. And it must be very difficult. And you've performed a lot of austerities. What can I do to help you? And the man says, oh, thank you, God, you've appeared before me finally. Yes, I have one desire. Ask whatever you want. And the man says, well, I was thinking as I'm pulling this barge, my feet really hurt. And Brahma says, of course, you're walking barefoot. So the man continues. He says, there's just one thing I want from you. If you could kindly pave the road here with mattresses so that as I walk along, I'm walking on mattresses. Ah, that would be so wonderful. And Brahma thinks, well, you could ask me for a kingdom. You could ask me for 100 elephants and fair maidens who will give you children, a temple of gold. Why ask me for that? But okay, that's what you want. So these are people who are motivated by small desires. They don't understand that yasmin vigate sarvam vigatam bhavati. By knowing him, you know everything. Yasmin prapte sarvamidam praptam bhavate. And by getting him, you get everything. If you have God, you have everything. Why would you ask for something so petty? So the gods are popular. It's always popular to go to different gods and offer them coins and things and make your desires known. But Krishna says here, I'm in everyone's heart as the super soul. Yo yam yam tanum bhakta shradayar chitam arkati. I'm there as the Paramatma. As soon as one desires to worship a demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. So if that's what you want, if you're so seduced by the illusion that you want things here in the matrix, well, there's different gods you can pray to, and the Paramatma will help you in your faith to get those external things. Sataya shradaya yuktas tasya radhanam ihate. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. Krishna is the supreme cause of all causes, is ultimately empowering even the demigods. But Krishna continues. He says, men of small intelligence worship the gods, and they get limited and temporary fruits. They can go to heaven. But my bhaktas ultimately reach my supreme planet. Mad bhakta janti mam api. So in the 24th verse of the 7th chapter, Krishna says, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, was impersonal before and have assumed this personality. So this is another fault, a big rock in the path on the way to perfection, devotional perfection. They have this idea that God is impersonal. So these are different obstacles, anarthas in the path, addiction to the gods and the devatas, or the idea that Krishna himself is temporary. He's not eternal. They think that the impersonal has somehow manifested Krishna in an illusory form. They don't understand his transcendental existence, form, and activities, which are eternal and excellent. Avyaktam vyaktam apanam manyante mam abudhaya. Abudhaya means less intelligent. Param bhavam ajanato. They don't understand it. Param bhava, the supreme existence. And so, mamavyayam anutamam. They don't understand who Krishna is. And so they have trouble surrendering to Krishna. I get this a lot sometimes when I give a talk on the Mahabharata. People always ask me, so why is Krishna bad? Why does he do bad things? Why does Krishna tell Arjuna to do adharma and kill Karna? Why do the Pandavas go to hell? Why is Krishna killed? But these are all sort of another form of delusion by Maya. So deluded by Maya, Krishna is saying here, this sort of person declares, I have no eternal form, and that my manifest human form in the mundane plane is subject to birth and death like that of all the mortals. But this is because of their reliance on empiric knowledge, which is liable to defects like error, illusion, defective senses, and the tendency to cheat. So they don't believe in the transcendental reality of the Supreme Lord. This is another big stumbling block on the path. Krishna says, but these people they're in Maya, okay? They're fooled. They love to be seduced by the material energy, by the three modes of nature, by the matrix, if you like. And so, as a consequence of yoga maya, they're covered. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita mudho yam nabijanati loko mam ajam avyayam. So for these people, I don't reveal myself. I'm never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I'm covered by my internal potency. And therefore, they do not know that I'm unborn and infallible. So real divine knowledge, then, as is being explained in this chapter, is revealed knowledge. It's not that you can get there by yourself. It's not that through a particular form of meditation, you can unlock the door and break on through to the other side. But real divine knowledge is revealed. And how do you get that? Well, you have to go to someone who's closer to God than yourself and surrender. And then you'll see, through the mercy of Guru Dev, you can get a higher divine knowledge, but you can't come to that by the process of elimination. Normally, intelligence works on the basis of neti, not this, not that. For example, if you have a problem with your computer, what's wrong? Is it the internet? Was it my microphone? Is it this or that? And gradually, by eliminating possibilities, you come to understand, oh, that was the problem. So René Descartes, for example, he says, what's knowledge? Well, ordinary knowledge is always changing, so that can't be really knowledge. Knowledge I acquire by reading, study, something, but who am I really? And he comes to eliminate all other forms of knowledge other than that, I know I exist. Well, that's good. That's a starting point. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Try to understand what is spiritual nature. And we get to that by eliminating material nature. But what is divine nature? Not so easy. So Krishna reveals himself. Just as we're searching for Krishna, there's also the loving search for the lost servant. Krishna himself comes to search for us. He comes in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give us the Hare Krishna mantra. But of course, everyone listening to this talk, I'm sure you know all these things. I'm just here trying to represent in my impoverished manner my own particular understanding of Bhagavad Gita as I learned it from Srila Prabhupada, Srila Sridhar. So Krishna says, Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charajuna bhavishyani chabhutani mam tu vedana kaschana. So Krishna is here demonstrating his Aishwarya, his opulence as Bhagavan. This chapter is about Bhagavan, Aishwarya, Gyan, and Vigyan, how to know and realize the opulence of divinity by revealed knowledge. O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me, no one knows. Because if you could know God, you would be another God, wouldn't you? Ichcha dvesha shmutena dvanda mokhena bharata sarva bhutani samuham sarga janti parandapa. So this word moha, it means illusion. He says, O son of Bharat, conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities, arisen from desire and hate. Yesham tvantagatam papam, jananam punya karmanam, te dvanda moha nirmukta, bhajante mam dridhavrata. And dridhavrata, that's very nice. It means with strong determination, steadfast. People who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful activities are completely eradicated and are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. Bhajante mam dridhavrata. So there's all these impersonalist versions of the Bhagavad Gita, but again, this is a tough nut to crack. It's hard to understand. How do you, when Krishna says mam, how do you interpret that means something else? He's saying me. He's saying worship me. Okay, here's verse 29. Jara marana mokshaya mam ashritya chatantiye te brahmatad vidu kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakilam. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for moksha, liberation, take shelter of me, mam ashritya, like ashram, mam ashritya. They take shelter of me, chatanti te brahmachat vidu kritsnam. They're really spiritual. Brahma here means spiritual, because they entirely know everything about transcendental activity. So Krishna's point here is, if you're interested in knowledge, this is the path. This is the path towards divine knowledge. And he concludes the chapter with verse 30 saying, Shadhi bhutari daivamam sati jagyam ye vidu prayana kale pichamam te vidur jukta chetasaha. So he says, those who are in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So Adhibhuta means the governing principle of the material manifestation, and Adidaiva, the supreme God of all gods. So he's told Arjuna in this chapter, he said, well, try to understand the nature of God. If knowledge won't get you there, you can see God in his miracles. Some people can't. They want proof. The proof is all around them, but they want some sort of reasoning and evidence with a rational base. That kind of knowledge won't do. True realization is revealed This is possible for the surrendered souls. But there are some people who avoid surrender. Who are they? Well, they're nescient, they're stubborn, they refuse to admit any sort of argument, or they're fools, or they have small desires and so they worship the gods. But I'm the God of all gods. Some people are bewildered by the material nature, but I'm the governing principle of the material nature, so surrender to me. Bhakti Pradip Tirtha, who was a disciple of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and later took sannyas from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, summarizes the chapter like this. He says that the growth of bhakti yoga, which is based on shraddha or faith, is in this wise. When a jiva comes in contact with a sadhu, a saint who has realized the absolute person and can make others realize him, he's conversant with the following truths. For example, number one, Sri Krishna is the Supreme Lord and is the one reality without a second. Number two, he is the only God of love, beauty, truth, and harmony. Number three, his spiritual deeds in human form are done under the influence of his yoga maya or chit shakti. Number four, a jiva world, as well as this material universe, are manifestations of his jiva potency and mayic potency, respectively. Number five, a jiva's bondage is due to his attachment for sense objects born of mayic potency. And number six, emancipation from this bondage of Maya is only possible when he begins to worship the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna by means of Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion, through the grace of Sri Krishna and the spiritual precept. He is then convinced of the inaptitude of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Brahma Gyan, Paramatma Gyan, and the trivial pursuits of Salokya, equal realm, Sarshti, equal pomp, Samipya, vicinity, and Sayuja, identity with Godhead. A jiva can attain perfection in his sadhana if he takes recourse to shravana, hearing, kirtana, chanting, and smarana, meditation, with the full knowledge that he is the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord of all beauty, all love, all truth, and all harmony. Such a firm faith with the true conception of self and Godhead is known as Shraddha, which is the foundation stone of all religious practices based on the Bhakti cult. And here ends the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, entitled Jnana and Vijnana Yoga. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I was reading a little bit, so I'm not looking at the reactions of everybody out there, but I can see Pranashish is there, Dabadar Priya, Tungarasi Dasi, Lilavati Didi, Julian's iPhone, Radha Madhava Das, Ayusta Ananta Shesh de Spanya, Dmitry Bhakti Jogin, Strastvicha, everybody in Russia, and Dobre Dyan, Dobre Utra, Dobre Noch, to our friends in the East, in Ukraine and Russia, Ireland, and the United States, and all those who are listening. Thank you very much for paying attention. Again, I don't know why I have been nominated to this sort of reading. It's fallen to me by some sort of chance, karma, or divine arrangement, or derangement. But we're reading from Bhagavad Gita with notes by Baladev Vidyabhushan, by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Bhakti Pradip Tirtha, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, also having consulted the excellent translation of The Hidden Treasure, The Sweet Absolute by His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami. And I'm speaking a little bit on the basis of my own limited understanding and realization of the Bhagavad Gita, having thought about these things. So, any questions on the reading? Srila Prabhupada especially liked that verse, Daivahyesha Gunamaya Mama Maya Duratyaya, because it explains that it's very difficult to overcome the different modes of material in nature. And so I thought about that a lot. And guna is an interesting word because in one place it means quality. In another place, we're discussing the qualities of material nature, but these qualities sort of pull you in different directions. So somebody told me a good example of sattva guna is Mahatma Gandhi, and for rajagun we have Napoleon, and for tamagun maybe Tarzan. Because he's half man, half ape. So when we respond to our animal nature, we're more in tamagun, and when we're really in human activity and making things and creating and constructing buildings and driving our car, it's more rajagun. And sattvagun is more about meditation and being gentle and quiet. But all these different, it doesn't matter if you're sort of a very spiritual, vegan person living a spiritual life, doing good deeds. That's not what bhakti is about. Avadut Maharaj has a series now called Bhagavad Gita Boini Mir, which means war and peace in the Bhagavad Gita. And I haven't had the opportunity to see that, but I like the concept. It's an interesting concept, right? Because Arjuna is not so much of a sattvic guy, He's carrying a bow and arrow, sword. He's out there killing people. He went to the heavenly planets and caroused with the apsaras there. Was on the verge of seducing his own mother, not Menaka, but Urvashi. She cursed him. He fought with Shiva. So this is not, normally we see yogis, they don't fight with Shiva. They don't challenge Shiva to a duel. They're like, Om Namo Shivaya. They're very spiritual. But here's Arjuna. He's involved in Boinamir, War and Peace in the Bhagavad Gita. And I like that title also because Tolstoy, who wrote War and Peace, we know that he read the Bhagavad Gita. And he kind of preferred the Bhagavad Gita to the Bible. And he was someone who came to a pacifistic conclusion about both. So, and then Tolstoy, curiously, influenced Gandhi. Gandhi read Tolstoy, and he got his principles of nonviolence and the Indian movement. He got a lot of that by reading Tolstoy, who read the Bhagavad Gita. And then Gandhi used to give talks on the Bhagavad Gita. So you come full circle. I kind of like that. Boine Mir, Bhagavad Gita, War and Peace. It's always a big question for me. How is it possible that the message of the Bhagavad Gita is peace, isn't it? But he's telling Arjuna to fight. That was my first question to the devotees I met in New Orleans in 1972. I said, I read this book. I like the ideas in it, but I don't get it. How is it possible that Krishna's telling Arjuna to fight? Right now, we're in the middle of the Vietnam War. They want me to go and fight, but I don't want to go fight. I believe in peace and love. explain that? And they said, well, you know, the Bhagavad Gita really gets to a kind of internal struggle that we all have with Maya, the illusory energy, the matrix, which holds us in place like a spider web holds a fly. And we're struggling to get out of this matrix, this web. And Bhagavad Gita gives us divine knowledge by which we can develop love of God. And that's where true peace is found. And I thought, I'm going to read this book again. So here I am, almost 50 years later, I'm still reading the same book. People ask me, what's your favorite book? I tell them, Bhagavad Gita. And they're like, what? What's that? Like, oh, okay. Shakespeare. Shakespeare's good, but he doesn't have any philosophy. He's brilliant with words, but he's just playing with words. In fact, Tolstoy really hated Shakespeare just for that reason. He hated King Lear. So what is this? There's no philosophy here. Art should promote a higher understanding of who we are as human beings. And Shakespeare doesn't do this here. Of course, all the critics rejected Tolstoy's opinion. It's not very popular. But anyways, this is my book. This is Bhagavad Gita. We're here at Gita Talks with Vrajasundari, Pranashish, Tungarasi Dasi, and the rest. And I'm trying to do this every Friday. It's morning in Mexico. We're trying to do this every Friday morning. And we've made it through 7 chapters now. And they want me to do the rest of the book. That's 11 more chapters. Originally, I'd planned, and we had invited Madhusudan Maharaj and Pranashish to take over the rest of the work. But they told me, no, you do it. So here I am. You're stuck with me, I'm stuck with you. But being able to do this gives me incredible joy in my heart. It gives me a great inspiration. It gives me some service. And so I'm very happy. And so I guess if everybody's satisfied and there's no real questions, we can get on with the rest of our day, struggling with the illusion of Maya and pulling on the different threads, trying to cut through the illusion. Okay, so thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to you. All glories to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Sundar, Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj, and all the great Vaishnava heroes in our line. And we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Oh, I couldn't turn off the translation. I wanted to say Jai, Mahayogi Prabhu ki Jai. And I was saying it, but you were not hearing me. Okay, so see you next week. Увидимся на следующей неделе. Mahayogi Prabhu will be giving us the 8th chapter. So let's read it beforehand. Харе Кришна. Всех ждем через неделю. Махаyogi Прабhu на следующей неделе будет нам рассказывать о 8 главе. Примите, пожалуйста, на поклоны. Дандават. Харе Кришна.